Hello and welcome to the penultimate session of the Museums Association 2020 virtual conference. It's been quite a journey, and this is Tamsin Russell's very last in practice session, just half an hour long. We've got the AMA in a COVID world. But first of all, as usual, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping announcements. So firstly, as attendees, your cameras and microphones should be automatically disabled, but you can use the chat function, and please do, on your menu bar to talk, to introduce yourselves, talk to others, share links and experiences. You can tweet using the hashtag Museums2020. There is live closed captioning available at the bottom of your Zoom screens. Just click show subtitles, as well as live audio description. Just click interpretation and then switch to the French channel. If you have a question that you'd like Tamsin to address, then please post your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get through as many as possible. But if we don't manage to, then I will capture them and send on to Tamsin afterwards. You can leave and rejoin the webinar at any time, and we are recording the discussion today, so it will be available on our website later on, hopefully next week. Finally, please bear with us if there are any technical hitches, and do message me privately in the chat if you're having any trouble with anything. Right now, I shall hand over to Tamsin to get started. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ellen. I hope you can all hear me. Good afternoon / evening. So my name's Tamsin Russell, and I work at the Museums Association, and it feels very apt at the end of a week of immersive professional development to be talking about one of our core professional development programs. So for those of you that were the AGM yesterday, you will have seen the faces and names of over 30 people that have been awarded the AMA over the last 12 months. And I am going to be sort of talking around what this program is. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, but I really want to make sure that I answer any questions that you have about the program. So without further ado, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And just for those individuals, if you want copies of these slides, feel free to drop me an email and I can share them, absolutely. So are we sitting comfortably? I'm going to begin. So I'm going to talk about the AMA, and what I'm going to talk about in the time that we have together is what it is in general, and then I'm going to look through these different elements. I'm going to talk about the process and the paperwork, so what you can expect, the development framework that sits around the AMA and sits around you as an AMA candidate, for want of a better description, to support you in your learning. I'm going to talk a little bit about the roles and relationships that exist to support you as well. And then finally talk about our responses to COVID-19. So one of the questions that I've had to field most frequently is the AMA still running? So I hope at the end of today's session, you'll be really clear that it is running. It's actually running faster than it's ever run before, because we've put lots of additional support and guidance in, because what we were really conscious of was that individuals may well be doing their AMA not in their organisation, not with a peer group, not with a direct line manager, and also navigating everything that was going on. So we were really conscious that we wanted to make sure that that wraparound support, that development framework was enhanced as a result of lockdown and COVID. So we're going to talk about all of that today. So first of all, what is the AMA? So I suppose the first thing really is it is not a taught course. So it is a professional development program. So it focuses on your professional development in situ, so in a role or in a sector. And you'll see the really important word there is it's self-directed. So whilst there is this development framework, it very much is owned and led by you. There are some eligibility criteria, which is around having had some experience in the sector. So 12 months experience in the sector, either as a volunteer or as a member of staff or as a freelancer. And we're not saying that's full-time experience, it's just 12 months experience. And the reason that's in here is because it's not a taught course. What we don't have is the opportunity to take you through all the very basic stages around what museums are like. You need to have some knowledge around what working the museum sector is like, to really reap the benefit of this programme. And that some knowledge is, we call it emerging professional competence. You have to be a member of the Museums Association, full or concessionary, and in total the cost is £360. But as you will see, we do have funding available for those of you that are self-funding for the programme. We have a competency framework that supports the notion of becoming a well-rounded museum professional. And what does that mean? It means that you appreciate, respect, and understand that there are multiple disciplines in the museum sector, and that for the museum sector to be successful, we all have to work together and collaborate to deliver to our collections benefit and to the benefit of our communities. So we want you to have a really holistic understanding of what is important within the sector. In addition to that, we know that individuals have particular interests or want to develop specific specialisms. So as part of the AMA, we urge you under competency 13 to develop a particular area that you are most interested in. You don't need to tell us what it is to begin with, because that might evolve over time. But we really are focused on, if you were at my session yesterday, this sort of T-shaped approach. So your specialism is the line of the T, and then everything else, all those other generic competencies, are the cross or the top of the T. You can see there are 4 questions already. I can't wait. It's a Museums Association programme, therefore it's very clearly embedded in what we feel is important for the sector, collections and communities. So throughout, you'll see reference to socially engaged practice, to ethical conduct, and these are 2 really important documents that we explore as part and parcel of the programme. So what does the process look like? First of all, you need to register. And as part of that registration, we'll get you to do a self-review. And that is essentially a gap analysis. So you look at all of those competencies that I just talked about, and we'll look at those in more detail in a moment, and you assess yourself against those. You reflect on where you feel you have strengths and where you have greater opportunities to develop. The self-review serves a number of purposes. 1, to do just that. 2, to start your reflective journey. 3, to familiarise yourself with the competencies. And then 4, to enable me to double check that you've got enough experience. So the only person to begin with that sees that self-review is me. So I'm the person that sees that. Once you've done your self-review and you're on your way, we would get you to choose a mentor. And we have 160 different mentors across the UK that you can choose from. As part of that, you have a discussion around your relationship with them, which is the practical considerations, the logistics around how you're going to work together. And that's summarised in a document called the Mentoring Agreement. A really important document is around the CPD plan. So that's about saying, what am I going to do over the next 2 to 3 years? And then you do it. And then you capture it in your CPD log. So your log is the document where you capture all of your reflections, all of your hours. Just think about how many hours you could be putting down if you'd already registered. So over 50 hours in this week alone, and you only need to do 35 a year to be able to be doing your AMA. So tick if you've done that, if there are any AMA candidates here. At the end of year 1, we force you to look back. So we get you to do something called an interim review, which looks back at where you've come from and helps you look forward for your last year. In that last year, we get you to do a project, and that's really to hone your skills as being a project manager, but in a developmental place. When we get to the end, and I'm not going to talk about this in huge detail now because there's more dedicated slides, we need to then look to see what you've done. So for your professional review, which is the end point of your AMA journey in year 3, you write a final review, a future CPD plan, and you submit your CV to us. And at the end of this process, you're either awarded, as you'll have seen yesterday at the AGM, or you'll be referred. And a referral just basically means, we think you've done lots, but you're not just there yet. Go away and do this, and come back and go through the professional review again. So that's the process. So I've talked quite a bit about different types of paperwork. Just for those of you that want to see what those different types of paperwork are, they're here in a nice linear list for you. We have templates for them all and word counts. And all the way through the process, you either have your mentor to support you or me and the MA to support you. So we offer a support service in terms of reviewing your paperwork. And at certain points, we might externally review it as well. So we have some external assessors that would review your paperwork. Next slide. So what is this development framework that I've talked about so far? So we have a competency framework. We have support groups where you get to meet other AMA candidates. We have a funding pot dedicated to individuals that are doing their AMA. If you're an AMA candidate, you can use our benevolent fund for professional development outside of what the MA does. A raft of resources, mentoring, which we'll talk about in more detail, and then the program manager, that's me, and I try to hold it all together. So let's talk about competencies. You may well have competencies in your own organisations, and a competency, for those of you that don't, are skills, knowledge and behaviour that when combined result in good job performance. What we have is 4 competency headings, and underneath we have some competencies or competency statements that essentially highlight what we're expecting you to be able to do. To support that, we have evidence descriptions that essentially say, okay, well, this is what you're doing. This is what we expect to see at the end of your time with us doing the AMA. And those evidence descriptions describe emerging level of professional competence, which is often where people start, but not always. An established level of professional competence, which is where we expect people to finish. So when you start your AMA, you should have an awareness of and an understanding of those competencies. You may not have any direct hands-on experience, or you may have some, but it's just not very deep. By the time you finish your AMA, you should have a much deeper and richer understanding around those competencies, and also have direct hands-on experience in some of them, not all of them though. So that's the competencies. The next 4 slides take you through the competency framework. I am not going to talk through all of these, but I will leave the slides up so you can read them so that you can understand the type of thing we are trying to develop. So our first competency is understanding the sector. And this is the big picture, as the title says. So this is about understanding the big picture of the museum sector in the broadest terms. What we have underneath the title of the competency is a summary of what this competency is all about. And then underneath you will see there are 5 competencies relating to this particular competency heading. It's all about the why and what's happening at the moment and the relationships that you build. So it's that big picture approach. The second competency heading is public engagement and benefit. So again, we have a title, a summary of what this competency heading or competencies are all about, and then we have competency 6 and 7. So competency 6 is all around programming and audiences. Competency number 7 is around audience development, evaluation and attraction of audiences. Telling me it's 5 o'clock with 15 minutes to go. Our third competency is stewardship of collections, and this really is the one that does what it says on the tin. There's really no space for ambiguity here. Again, we have a title, a description of the competency, and then competency 8 and 9. 8 is all about the collections management process. I could pretty much just in brackets say spectrum. And number 9 is about how we research and develop knowledge of collections broadly. The final competency is around individual and institutional integrity. Again, there's a title, a summary, and we have 3 competencies here. Ethical responsibility of museums and galleries, governance, which is one of my pet focuses, I love it. And then more importantly, a whole raft of different things to do with management. Now, if you remember rightly, I said we want you to be a well-rounded museum professional. So that's competencies 1 to 12. In addition, we challenge you to come up with an area that you're most interested in, a specialism you want to develop. It doesn't mean you have to be the world expert. It just means you have to have developed it more over the course of your AMA. And that's competency number 13, unlucky for some. Developed professionalism and expertise in a specific area of interest. So it could well be that you've been working in a museum for a wee while, but something that really engages you is the work around dementia engagement. Or it could be that what's really focused for you is the concept around disposals and collections review. Whatever it might be, it is up to you, entirely up to you about what you want to develop. So those are the competencies. I talked about evidence description. This is easy. So I don't expect you to be able to see it, but I just want to use it to illustrate what we have. So this is the understanding the sector competency, the heading, the summary. We've got all of the competencies down the side. Hopefully you can see it. Then we have content that says emerging or established. Okay, so we give a little bit more detail, often towards the end of your AMA. So you're checking and balancing all of this as you go. Support groups. So we have support groups in place. There are 12 regional and national support groups. Since March, we've moved to quarterly Zoom sessions and I facilitate those. The regional support groups are really good, is that it supports your understanding of the sector. What we certainly find is that if, for example, you're based in a national, and I have been on numerous occasions, you often seem to have sort of a national lens on everything. You think everybody's got a billion departments and has lots and lots of opportunities and lots of reserves. So the nationals is just a really sort of fairly glib example, but a really good one is that if, as part of the support group, regardless of the governance structure of your museum, regardless of the discipline that you work in, you're going to be sitting next to different people that have different experiences, and so forth. You have a much broader understanding of the sector. It also helps us to evidence competency 5, which is all around building relationships. Don't worry, you're not going to be tested on this. At the meetings, every meeting, we look at either a topical issue. So in July, we looked at Black Lives Matter and the impacts and influences of the museum sector. And then we also look at ethical issues. So we recently looked at our October meeting around the Kickstart scheme and what does that mean for ethical workforce dilemmas. So the support groups are a real tonic to enable you to expand your ethical and critical thinking, because we measure that at the end. I'm going to speed up a wee bit. I've already talked about the benevolent fund. So that is available for those of you that are self-funding. If you have found yourself to have been made redundant, then you can have a 75% contribution. So there is similar discussions, obviously, if you're also a freelancer that's found themselves unable to work. So there is funding to support your AMA fees. And we also have funding to support CPD activities. So there is lots to help you. A raft of resources, your weekly email from me with updates and signposting. Obviously, we have our Museums Essentials online program that talks very clearly to some of those competencies. Every other week, I run virtual AMA Q&As, and we also have workshops when you're getting to the end of your AMA process around getting yourself ready. I'm here and I sort of bridge the gap between the mentors and the candidates, potentially you guys, and I support our professional reviewers. We have 2 policies that are really important. So we have an on hold policy that enables you to stop your AMA and therefore give yourself some breathing space. That's been utilised a lot during the pandemic, as you can imagine. And we also have a diversity and inclusion policy to ensure that you are afforded the best opportunity to perform throughout all of this process. There are mentors, that we have 160 of them. And this is essentially what they do. They're there to guide you through the process. You should meet with them 4 times a year. They receive training and refreshers. And the idea is that they hold that space for you. They deal with 1 second, it's my alarm saying stop talking. The ethics and conflicts and boundaries and supervision, they're there to help you, and they support the mentoring agreement. 1 second. The professional review. So the final part of all of this is an opportunity for you to showcase your learning, for you to showcase your learning journey, and you have to evidence with those descriptions an established level of competence. You have to demonstrate that you understand what your organisation does if you're in the organisation, what the sector does, who's the movers and shakers. You know, if somebody wants to talk to me about who would you recommend around reminiscence, I would say National Museums Liverpool and their House of Memories, even though it was a long time ago. It might be digital media. Oh my goodness, let's look at some, you know, let's look at Merle and the Absolute Unit. Volunteering, Museum of London, you know, all of those really, mindfulness, the Whitworth, all of those amazing sector examples, never mind everything else that we've heard over the last 5 days. Who are those role models, leaders, movers and shakers? So you've got that breadth of view. Also, what is the current thinking? So what reports have been produced? What toolkits have been produced? Have there been any updates to how we approach our professional practice? So it is about having that broad view, but equally, it's about your professional practice. We want to know what you've done, how you've learned, how you've made a difference, what you have done in your own institutions. The professional review is an hour-long interview. So in addition to the submission of all of this stuff, this up-to-date CV, final review documentation, you also have a one-to-one, currently over Zoom. And this is the format. So we ask you, talk me through a typical day. We then hear about your project presentation. We then explore the relationships you've built during your time. We then get you to talk about an ethical or topical issue of your choice. We then ask you about the area you have developed most during the course of the AMA. And then depending on your paperwork, we might well explore any of the other competency headings. So what have we done in terms of COVID-19? So the doors are still open. You can still sign up to the AMA. It is not a taught course. You can start and sign up this evening if you so desire. What we found is that our existing AMA community have had to potentially look at their CPD plans and rescope them, change them, or delay some of those activities. Equally, for projects, people have had to think differently, rescope them, stopped, changed, or delayed. Previously, you would have to have been active in the sector formally, either as a volunteer, a member of staff, or as a freelancer to continue on your AMA. We've changed that. So if you're made redundant, if your ability to volunteer has been compromised, you can continue to do your AMA, because we know that being engaged with the sector at this point in time might be exactly what you need. And actually, you might have more time, strangely enough, to focus on your next steps. So you continue doing your AMA, even if you're not active in the sector. Certainly for those of you that have found themselves to be in an unwaged situation, we would recommend that you downgrade membership from full to concessionary. This helps you financially to continue your AMA process. And I've already talked about the increased contribution that you can apply for from the Benevolent Fund. On hold is available for those at risk of redundancy or made redundant, or even if you're just feeling overwhelmed. We can just pause it until you're ready to continue. This is your programme, not my programme. I think I've got like 7 minutes to answer all the questions. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully some of the questions that were in the chat function, there are 14, have been answered. But if not, I will try and answer them now.
Right, I'm going to crack on. So, first question from a mysterious MN. Hi, Tamsin. Maybe you can get to this during the presentation. Just making sure I don't forget. Can you explain the differences to the FMA, please?
So the Fellowship of the Museums Association is a similar programme, but for those individuals that have worked and established and made significant impact at a regional, national or international level. So the competencies are slightly different. It's around leadership, managing change, advocacy, developing others and contributing to the sector development, as well as developing yourself.
Thanks. And then Susan Knight asks, how recent does the voluntary experience need to be?
There is no, it doesn't need to be. You could have been volunteering 10 years ago, and that's absolutely fine.
Great. And then Ben Price, is the membership fee and AMA fee separate, or is there an amalgamated package?
It's separate. So we changed our fee structures for both membership and the AMA. So if I was doing this talk just 18 months ago, it would have cost you £900 to do your AMA. So we've now reduced it to 360. So yeah, they are separate. So you have your membership and then you do your AMA. But if you're self-funding, remember, you can apply for 50% contribution to those funds.
And then we have a question from Ellie King. I'm a second year PhD working with both a university and a museum. Would I be able to do/start the AMA during my studies?
So you would be eligible. It really does depend. In a way, a PhD should be joyful. It's high workload already. And my sense would be is rather than necessarily having an additional burden of doing your AMA, and it's not a burden, but when you're doing a PhD, it could very well feel like it. You may end up taking the joy out of both. Equally though, the amount of professional development you would be doing during the course of your PhD would be really easy to log to enable you to progress very quickly. So I'm really happy to have a conversation with you. A really good starting point would perhaps just to be looking at the self-review. That paperwork is on the website. So even before registration, you can look at the self-review and begin to think about, you know what, are these competencies right for me? Is it the right time?
Next question from Supriya Chanda. Is it possible to enroll directly to the FMA for the senior people who have master's degrees in museum studies and have substantial experience in museum and postgraduate teaching? And also, is it open to the candidates stationed overseas?
Great question. So yes, you don't have to have an AMA to do the FMA because the AMA hasn't always been around. So not everybody that exists had an opportunity to do the AMA. So people can do, and the criteria and the competencies for the FMA are on the website. Have a look and then drop me a line. We usually have a preliminary conversation and you have a conversation with some of our FMAs. Is it available overseas? Yes. Recently, so in the time of COVID, we have found that people have contacted us. So we've not done it a significant amount, and the focus is primarily on the UK sector, but obviously we're influenced internationally. So yes, in principle, this is also open for international members.
Next question from Joseph L. Sorry, this is, I think, so this is about networking. And you spoke about the significance of networking for successful completion of the AMA earlier, it sounds like. And then we wondered your thoughts on how networking can continue on Zoom, for example, or the MA creating examples of networking to help with the AMA. So is Zoom network applicable to be able to carry on your networking examples with the AMA?
Yeah, any networking.
Brilliant. And then another question from MN, is that project a real one or a theoretical one?
Real one.
And a question from Jessica Venner. Is this useful for somebody at the start of their career to undertake the AMA? So is it useful and a replacement to a traineeship almost, but possibly less intense?
So it's useful, and I would say that obviously because it's one of the programs that I run. It's useful at any point in your career. So we also have lots of mid-career professionals saying, actually, I want to take stock of what I know. I might want to diversify or change my route. I want to get access to a mentor. So it's helpful for anybody. The important thing is that it's not taught. You're not hosted anywhere. It is self-directed. So the benefits are more significant if you are placed within an institution. But we realise that in the current situation, that is more problematic.
Then this is probably the last question we're going to get to. Laura Black, what if your current museum or sector role is only temporary?
That's absolutely fine.
That's a nice simple answer. I think that's probably about the amount of time we have. So I think we need to wrap up, I'm afraid. There's going to be a 15-minute break where I think I might make a gin and tonic before Jean Cameron's wrap up of day 5 and the end of conference. And then Gillian Findlay and Laura Pye look forward to next year's conference. So thank you so much, Tamsin. And if you have any further questions, you can email Tamsin and check the website for any further information. Otherwise, maybe see you at the networking, and thank you so much for attending. Thanks.